pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. And if we could, oops. Yep. And are we recording? Okay, great. Just double checking. Great. Thank you. Could you do the roll call, please?
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Cassidy,
Yes.
Councilmember Dan Hahn. Let the record reflect that Councilmember Hahn is absent. Councilmember Cox. Present. Councilmember Stubble. Present. Councilmember Josh Hahn.
Yes.
And Mayor White.
Also present. Thank you. Thanks, folks, for joining us here. We appreciate that. If you've not been here before, a couple of things for you to note. If you've got a cell phone on you, please make sure it's set to on the silent setting. If you need to have a conversation, please step out of the hall and move away from the door. Even whispered conversations in here or just outside, the acoustics are kind of interesting and float back in and can be pretty disruptive. So we'd appreciate you doing that. But thank you again for being here. We appreciate that. So we only have one option tonight or one discussion topic here tonight. It's a non-action item about our Title II license. And before we get into that specifically, I just wanted to note that it's been great that we've had our two open houses and a lot of conversations that we've had both there after the post-meeting meeting, kind of classic conversation. Lots of one-on-ones as well with license holders who weren't able to attend those meetings. And I find it really heartening that we can have these thoughtful conversations about how to better manage alcohol use in our community. And while I think a small group would take a more fatalistic approach of, gosh, it's so hard, it's so multifaceted, why will this actually do anything? I appreciate that we're taking I would say, a more holistic and optimistic approach of, yes, it is multifaceted. And so our responsibility and our role in this role is that we should be trying to address the things that we can address, and really appreciate the thoughtful conversations that we've had about that among ourselves with license holders and also the general public. It's nice to see that we can have those kinds of conversations. So tonight, what we'll do is talk through some of the proposed amendments that council members have brought forward. Again, this is to discuss them. We're not voting on any of them. The idea is, can we then better refine the wording, not to overly wordsmith what we're talking about tonight. My suggestion would be that whoever brought forward that potential amendment, if it seems to have traction and general agreement, if there's wordsmithing, then that council member does the further wordsmithing to bring to when we do have it for our second reading and voting. In terms of when that would happen, to be determined. Our traditional business meeting is next week, and it's unrealistic to think that we'd be able to do any kind of amendments by Thursday afternoon to be able to have them in the packet. So again, we're not in a rush. We want to do it right, and so we can. There's a possibility for that we could have a special meeting before our work session towards the end of the month on the fourth Tuesday for our second reading for that. So in terms of what you got before you, the document titled Title II Revisions that has some pink on the bottom, that was brought forward by Councilmember Larson. The other one that's titled 4 Areas of Focus is something that Councilmember Stubble was a primary person on, but also with myself and Interim Chief Waugh for that. And so, and Councilmember Cassidy. So what I would propose doing is starting with the component of this that had the most, I'll call it kind of topic of conversation, which is the point system and fines. And I'm trying to change my language because that was some of the feedback we got at our second meeting, and a post-meeting meeting was demerits sounds not as good as simply having points. Folks are used to the idea of having points on your license, and that sounded more palatable than demerit. Sounds like they're getting, kind of scolded. Like, that's a great suggestion. And I think tonight what we're going to hear is lots more continued conversation about how we can find the best of both worlds and be more accountable and responsible in how we manage alcohol in our community. So with that, and then I'd also remind folks, and if folks in the audience have copies of this, if you're looking at the document, so we did have our first reading and some changes were made on that. And so for the first reading, anything that was changed is in green text on the current document. Things that are blue, if it's blue and in italics, that is language that came from state statute that we brought into as a proposal for this because we wanted to make it easier for license holders to understand the responsibilities they already have by having a liquor license. Wait, I just said that the opposite way, didn't I? Italics, I'm looking at Rochelle for this. So blue in italics is state language. Okay, I did have that right. And then, correct. So it's blue in italics. Right. So blue italics is from state statute that currently applies to license holders, but is not in our ordinance. Blue plain text is either was existing language in our ordinance, but moved to a new location. Or the simplest way to describe that. All right. So with that, moving to the point system, which get the moving towards that. So that's on our copy, page 11, section 2.3.1. And Councilmember Stubel, I'm going to turn it to you because I think you had some things that start right at the head of that.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll just quickly reiterate my deep appreciation for the incredible amount of feedback and input that we've been hearing throughout the many meetings and in private sessions, one-on-one sessions, in writing. So to everyone who's weighed in some form or fashion, thank you, and look forward to keep hearing from you as well as we continue these refinements, because I do believe some of what much of what I'll bring home tonight or forward tonight is reflective of what I've been hearing. Concerns, new ideas, issues raised, clarifications needed. So it's a great example of informed policymaking, I think. So thank you for the numerous meetings, Mayor. I did, with Councilman Cassidy, crafted an increased purpose statement for 2.3.1, the beginning of the demerit point system section. There is a purpose statement there already. But we were hearing, and I won't speak any longer for Councilman Cassidy, but I was hearing, in a lot of the questions people were raising and why is this happening, I thought, let's have a very clear intent statement to frame what else is going to come. Why are we doing this, right? I think that will benefit future users of the policy and future license holders and members of the public to understand exactly what we're after here, and then it sets up what comes differently. So council, you get the privilege of having this in front of you. I'm sorry to those in the audience. Shall I read it? I'll try to go slow. Great. I know. Apologies in advance. So the new purpose language would be thus: the purpose of this section is to enhance community safety through the oversight of liquor licenses. The city shall achieve this by establishing a proactive system to reduce violations of state and local liquor laws, encourage voluntary compliance, and provide a framework for escalating enforcement actions when warranted. To accomplish this purpose, a system of fines and demerits will be established to quantify violations of state and city regulations and set thresholds that will determine whether the city shall consider seeking district court review and possible suspension or revocation of liquor licenses. These violations shall be accrued only from the actions of license holders, agents, and employed staff, and only through judicial conviction, if applicable, or by evidence documentation by the LPD and city clerk, if in the case it's not a convictable offense. No lawyer has reviewed that language, so I'm sure there's some wordsmithing to be done by those experts, but I hope this gets to a more detailed and clear intent of why we're setting up this system.
The only addition I would say to that is if we adopt this, that we don't say LPD, that we say Land or Police Department.
Yeah.
and be spelled out.
And throughout, I would propose, again, instead of demerit, state points. Yeah, just calling it point system. Yeah, so instead of, find and replace point system instead of demerits for that. I think it's great having a stricter, or not stricter, a more explicit purpose. Because again, that was in conversation with a lot of our license holders. The initial response that this was somehow being more punitive, more arbitrary. And in fact, our intent is exactly the opposite, that currently it is absolutely undefined what would lead to any kind of conversation about is further action warranted. And what we're trying to do is exactly that opposite, that we have much more measured and explicit steps and intermediate steps as well for that. And so I like that we can include that in that, both for now and for the future.
Mayor, if I
Yep.
may emphasize, I think 3 pieces of this statement. Again, this comes directly from concerns that have been raised throughout the process. So this makes very clear upfront what is already in the system, but that the district court is actually the entity that would take action on suspension or revocation, not
Mhm.
us. And secondarily, that these are violations that are not going to be accrued from the actions of a member of the public, a customer in a store, right? This is going to be somebody who's employed by that license holder. And so there's an accountability to the license holder by those whom they employ, not people in the parking lot.
Yep.
And then thirdly, that where violations are criminal in nature, misdemeanors, we're waiting for conviction before they would be accruing demerit points. It's not just on, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Yep. Did
yeah.
it work on that? Great.
Yeah.
But on conviction, if it's a convictable offense, or again, we'll document it if it's, something like record keeping and,
Yep.
and not criminal in
Yeah.
nature. So again, I think there's quite a bit of feedback we all have heard around those concerns. Is it council doing this? What about somebody in my parking lot? So this is trying to make that very clear.
Yep. Great. And any further conversation about purpose statement? Great. All right. Do you want,
I guess I do have a little bit of a question. I was just, bear with me as we just are looking at this for the first time. Is there thought to doing a more purposeful, intentional statement for the entire title versus just the demerit section? Because it's not just the demerit or the point system. Gosh darn it. Sorry about that. Point system. I've had that already in my life. You know what I'm saying? So is there reason why we wouldn't just do it for the entire title? Because isn't what we're trying to accomplish here? And not just in
Yeah.
the point system?
Mayor, I'm
Yeah.
open to that, certainly, because of course you'll see that there's another purpose statement for later in the section too, to be clear about enforcement and appeals. Now, I think there's some parts of this title that, I kind of look to you, one, Rochelle, for where would we add it in the beginning? Is that common? Is that standard practice? But secondarily, some of it's already clear. I don't know that we need a purpose for where the state statute sections are being added. But I'm not opposed. We have to work
Yeah.
on that language right now to make it more broad, because this statement is,
specific
specific
to
to the new system we're assigning with thresholds and points.
nicely done, noted points.
There could be other subsections that have their own purpose statement too, perhaps, 2.1.4. I'm just, flipping through
Mhm.
here. It does not have one. I don't. So Councilwoman Cox, I think I turn back to you there. Where else is our intent missing perhaps? And that clarification of purpose would be beneficial.
Yeah. And I guess as I continue to think about it, it's really this section that had the most confusion about why it was being instituted. And so I think this is where a purpose statement can be helpful as opposed to overall.
It just draws my attention to the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that's been a little bit missing overall about why. So not that we need a purpose statement for all of it, but maybe articulating that to constituents is what is our goal here? So just a thought.
And I will happily say if an overall purpose statement is something, please consider,
Yeah.
drafting that would be great to see. Okay. Great. With that, we're going to tackle the next part there, and then Councilmember Larson, also help us make sure we don't inadvertently glance past anything you've got that's also at the same time or in the same section.
So I think Mayor will come back to some of the violations and the points, which is also in Councilman Larson's. But if we stick with this idea of enhancing the purpose statements, that where one is missing now is in subsection 2.3.1D. Now, I'll say as an aside, I think this actually should be a standalone section instead of a subsection of 2.3.1, just because of the weediness of it, the formatting. I think there's a lot there, but that's a perhaps clerk's decision, but I'll put that out. For now, it's 2.3.1D. There's no purpose statement here. And here's the draft I think that we could consider. Again, to make clear our intent and what's follows within this section. So to ensure due process to liquor license holders, the city shall establish the following procedures for enforcement and appeals of the system described in 2.3.1. The license holders have the opportunity to dispute the documentation of individual violations through a hearing, as detailed in subsection below. We can do references. Additionally, in cases where license holders have exhibited a documented pattern of violations of local and state regulations, and after the accrual of a predetermined demerit amount, point amount, a suspension or revocation hearing will take place. These processes proceed and the findings inform a vote by the governing body to potentially initiate district court action to rule on the suspension or revocation of licenses. Mayor, again, plenty perhaps wordsmithing and references to add to that, but in general, I think I was trying to, D right now has a very detailed set of steps for the individual violation disputations, and then similarly detailed steps for suspension hearing requirements, hearing examiners. Frankly, it's, even for me, it gets to be a little bit of a confusing section. And so I wanted to almost think about it as storytelling through this intent statement of like, here are the things that are coming at you within this section. It's about individual violation hearing. It's about suspension and revocation hearing. It's about the pattern of violations, right, that we have done above. So perhaps the wordsmithing would help benefit, but I think that section got pretty messy, honestly, between the two different sets of hearings and who's doing what. And so outlining it at the beginning might help.
I'd agree with that. And I mean, we run into that as being unclear about what our role as a governing body is and to what extent we have authority. And so I think that's important to have literally in black and white that all we can do is make a recommendation, and we're trying to make that recommendation on more objective criteria from the first section.
There is just and you guys, are you addressing this with the next one, clarifying some of, did you address that in 2A, B, C? Because within the document itself on page 11, there's just some numerical issues. And the other question I have, Rochelle and Adam, is when writing an ordinance of this manner in your 2-3 or 3.2.3.1, violations or enforcements need to be under that same section, or do they not? Can they have their own? So that's following you understand what I'm saying? So it talks about what 2.3.1 is, and then within that in D, it goes to the enforcement and appeals. You want that under the same section, is that correct? Or no? Councilman Stubble, you just made the comment that thinking it could be its own section, potentially. I'm just curious if that's
possible. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it necessarily
Matter.
matters, to tell you the truth. I
Okay.
mean, we're trying to make it as clear as possible. I think sometimes we over legislate and overwrite some of this stuff and make it more complicated than it's worth. And so I would caution you on doing some of that. If you want to make this probably more simple so anyone can pick it up and understand what you're trying to do.
Right. Okay. And so then I would just note under that subsection D that it's enforcement and appeals, Rochelle, it says A, B, it goes to A again, then back to B. into B. So then it just needs to, that just is a,
Yeah.
yeah, technicality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything else on kind of a purpose statement explaining the roles and responsibility and the process? So, good. Okay,
Thank you.
all right. So now getting into a little bit more the meat of the matter, so to speak, about clarifying some of those the violations and points associated with them in the process.
Shall I, Mayor?
Yes,
So this
please.
is then 2.3.1B. And the first one occurred to me, and I ran it past a few license holders during the meeting in December when we were trying to define problematic and at what level of intoxication does action need to take. And Councilman Larson, you've taken a good swing at this too. But as I was listening to that conversation and hearing license owners very eloquently describe their own internal practices and their internal authorities to determine what to do with a customer, and some of them had very responsible ways to deal with this, I thought, we're not actually interested, I don't think, in defining when they should remove the person. We just want to know if that person's on the street. If it's reached a threshold where the business owner says, this person is not welcome in my establishment anymore because of being threatening, being whatever, we want to know if they're going on to another establishment perhaps. And so, Chief Wall, please weigh in if this is adequate, but I thought instead of trying to define when they should take that action, let's just actually get to the heart of the matter. Is we just want to know if you've taken that action so we can be proactive with that person on the street and perhaps, and not that we're treating them like a criminal, right? But that we can understand if they're going to a different venue where they might also have, problematic behaviors.
Yeah.
So this is a simple deletion here, such that the violation is failure to notify law enforcement concerning removal of persons from the premises. Full stop. Not for why they removed the person. That's up to them.
If I can add one thing, I would say, yes, that's the ultimate point is for us to get eyes on, right? To make sure they don't go somewhere else. But I don't want to leave out the fact that the amount of domestic violence and other crimes that are committed by people that are impaired is just as effective. So if we're aware of their current mindset to the point where they've been removed from somewhere, we now have proactive due diligence to make sure that they don't continue to commit other crimes, not just at another venue.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that this is kind of where I was going. I think that you've pretty well covered this, but from one establishment to another, from one person to another, problematic is pretty difficult to define and say, that because a person does this or this, they're problematic. Well, they're only problematic unless the business owners cannot deal with it.
Yeah.
And so when it gets to a point that that they say, this your behavior is no longer acceptable in here. We tried visiting with you. We've tried talking with you. We've done the things that we normally do, and get things under control. And you've shot that in the hind end. So now, if you're kicking somebody out, I think that gets to a point where, the city needs to be notified, that is actually happening. And what brings that to a head is not necessarily the same thing with every establishment. I just look at dealing with problem people. I know that Chief Wall would be a whole lot different. His perception of problematic would be a whole lot different than my perception of it. And the same thing I think goes with the various liquor license holders here. There's some that have a really good grasp on it, and they might have some new employees that are not as far along as they are. And I just hope that if the new employee is kind of left in charge, that they have the freedom to make that judgment call and say, I don't want to deal with this. They call the PD and, that does two things. It lets chief know that you've got somebody that's a problem there. And, if we strike through the not necessary to call the police department, then that's a different thing there too. But that would also, help out on that situation. Whenever they call, that's you've got a problematic person there, at least in the eyes of the person that's in charge of that establishment. And whether that same behavior would be problematic in another bar, you don't know. But it has to be for that particular employee at that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Mayor,
and-
if I may, it's not my place to make recommendations, obviously, but if we move away from trying to define what problematic means, I think that's a lot of, in our public meetings and in our feedback, the definition of them wanting us to define problematic or define intoxicated. I don't know that that's an absolute as much as a blanket statement of when you decide as the owner that
Right.
you've kicked someone out, or for whatever the reason is,
Absolutely.
right? So
Yeah.
if we remove trying to define problematic or intoxicated, or, because it's different for everybody, if we're able to remove those definitions and just, hey, when you kick someone out, please let the police know, that might be a resolution.
I think that's what I was going for there.
So
Okay,
shall we accept
yep.
that deletion to that one? I know we're not
Yeah.
voting, but
Yeah, we're not
Looks like
voting,
we're-
but it seems like we've got general agreement for that.
then Mayor, the next one I have here is around record keeping. This was a question raised by one of our restaurant liquor license holders who was like, what records? If this is a
Right.
violation around record keeping, let's have a little more detail. So that's what I've attempted to do here. So replace record keeping as a violation with, quote, failure to maintain adequate records pertinent to the requirements of bar and grill and restaurant liquor licenses. And then you'll refer back in throughout the title that the revenue receipts, the gross receipts are detailed as a requirement for those two licenses. I'm also open to us just saying here, adequate gross revenue receipts. Looking to the clerk, just to be very clear that, correct me if I'm wrong, chief and clerk, if there's any other types of records, but I understood that to be gross revenue receipts. We want to see the 60-40 split from those two license holders. And if they don't keep those records adequately and cannot present them adequately at the renewals, then that's a violation that we would tag onto here.
I do like that one. I think this is actually one of the more egregious ones, interestingly enough, because one, if a bar, or excuse me, if a bar and grill and a restaurant liquor license are operating as a commercial establishment, they are taking away essentially from those who hold the proper
Yep.
license to do so, or the liquor license to do so, and then they're not operating in good faith, as we've said. So even, this demerit system for me is like, listen, that's your liquor license.
Yep.
You have to operate, if this is our intention, you have to operate that license as intended, as the state allows you to do so. And if you're not providing the records, I do like that we're defining it, because that doesn't, that excludes some, which is helpful, I think. But I'm like, geez, I think this should be a more point system issue,
Yeah,
because they're operating outside of their scope,
right.
and that's unacceptable to me.
Yeah. And maybe I'm being overly picky about this, so y'all can shoot me down for sure, but it'd be nice to note that this is a state requirement, not ours. So that as, having language in there, something about failure to maintain adequate records as mandated by state liquor division pertaining to the requirements of bar and grill and restaurant liquor license.
Well, and that's the other thing too, just because I'm going down the rabbit hole, but those restaurants who are doing it correctly are also being, it's like the other side of the coin, where if somebody isn't. So my push here is that I think this should be a little bit more of a point system issue, because that is what they say they're going to do. That's what they've paid for. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And I know there are restaurants and bar and grills in our community that operate accordingly. and how they're supposed to be a state statute.
But it's my understanding that we're saying that there's only two divisions, you know, you've got food and you've got drink. Aren't there other
In-
sources of income that come into that facility that are not food, they're not drink? That,
Entertainment, but not adult entertainment, can count towards revenue.
okay,
So the defining of that, Councilman, if I may, the defining of the proper record keeping is they have to show that 60% is not alcohol. And that's what the state statute is. So we'll use bar and grill
Okay.
specifically is 60% non-alcohol, 40% alcohol. Entertainment is included, not adult, in the 60% of revenue that they can gain. So if we define it as state statute in ours, that's what we're asking for, the proper records to show that 60% of your income came from alcohol or whatever. Or I mean, food or entertainment.
yeah. Okay, but I just, you know, the one that sticks in my mind is the laundromat, you know, where does that come in, you know?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, non-alcohol.
Yeah,
Okay.
and on that one, there are separate businesses operating under one roof. So that's it's an important distinction so that the laundromat is one business and their liquor license and food is another business.
Okay, okay. So they've still
So-
got that,
So the quarters do
Carved
not
off.
count towards either of
Okay.
those categories.
okay.
So just going back to, and you know, this isn't really in my nature, but I guess I'm going to go for it. If you don't provide adequate records, you will only receive a point deduction of 3. That's only happening yearly, which means they will never get to a point where we go to the next level. And they're always going to be able to operate outside of their scope.
I was
That
just-
is
I was
unacceptable.
just Gonna bring that
Yeah.
up, that's because this is only submitted, well, in the permit process, giving some kind of, here's why I can confidently state I will meet the 60-40 split. Or at the renewal period. So you're right, it's a limited time.
And as this is written, just remember that all a license holder does is fill out the paperwork. So they put down a number that was their food sales. They put down a number that was alcohol sales and a total, and that's it. They sign it under oath and that's what that looks like.
Yeah.
So they're not bringing us any sort of accounting documents or software or anything like that. They're just swearing that this is the truth.
So
Meaning it's not a lot of additional work on behalf of the.
Correct. So this whole record keeping process though that you're talking about, I don't know where that comes in.
It's almost not enforceable then.
right,
And if it's not enforceable, then you strike it, perhaps. I mean, if you're gonna take a legal risk to sign a document saying that it's true, I can't in any way argue that it's not true, right?
So
I-
one of the things we took out on our first reading was increased level of documentation about that. So that could be an option that we bring that back. I mean, I think what perhaps you're hinting at, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but if someone's going to deliberately not follow the financial breakdown, then personally, I have limited confidence that they're going to ethically sign a document and be accurate on it. You know, to me, they're already showing that they are willingly operating outside of what they should be doing. So why would it bother them to sign something and knowing it's not accurate? So I think if we want to have greater documentation about that, that's something we could consider bringing back into.
And part of that conversation entailed, well, what does the clerk
it
or the
look like?
deputy clerk do with that?
Yeah.
Do we look at it and see if the numbers match? Do we engage a forensic accountant? What do we
Yep.
do?
Some of that was the kickback too from the license holders of producing financial records to the city, potentially becoming public record and people having access to them. That's why you as the council agreed to strike that in the
Yep.
beginning. I want to quickly, if I can counter Councilman Cassidy in the sense of it's non-enforceable. I disagree if we take An example of something we've already been through, if we receive a complaint of a bar and grill operating not serving food, we follow up on that as the police department, put somebody in there to witness it on our own, and we now have it documented. So we do have an angle to enforce that. In regard to completely striking it, then we would not. That would be an example of when we would be able to.
That makes sense. My thought process was kind of what Rochelle said of like, what's the method through which you gain access to their information and do forensics on it? I mean,
From a total law enforcement perspective, I'm not a lawyer,
Right,
obviously,
that
but
seems-
for me, the access then becomes if we receive complaints that you are not in accordance with what your liquor license issued to you is, we as the police department do our follow-up and we can prove and or show that you're not, then we reach another level where we push to, if it's an accountant or whatever it is, to call for their records and ask for them, which you are entitled to do as the licensing authority.
And it seems like that second step would be tied to a certain number of points.
Correct.
So there would be a very onerous point quantity that would be associated with that preliminary investigation, if you wanted to use that verbiage, or inquiry.
It seems like though that what you're talking about, Chief Waugh, is potentially two different things. So if you get a complaint that someone is serving alcohol without serving food and they have a bar and grill license or a restaurant license, that's a violation of state statute in and of itself. But this is something about a record keeping to talk about how much revenue you had at the end of a year of a 60-40 split. Now that may be evidence if they have way more alcohol sales than they do of food sales that they're not selling food while they're selling alcohol, but they are potentially two different items.
But I think if you don't add it in our ordinance like we have, we end up at once a year at renewal saying, hey, 4 different times we had this complaint, 4 different times I put somebody in there, 4 different times we proved that you weren't doing it, then they're not meeting the point system or the due process of showing that we're doing our part to help you be successful.
Yeah. It makes me think that what we don't have on here is a bar and grill license selling alcohol without an active kitchen. And that should be one of the, something that accumulates fines and points for it.
Yeah, Mayor, I think that's where I was headed too. So I think if I'm tracking where we're headed here, the intent, the record keeping, which would be amended to failure to maintain adequate gross revenue receipts, and state statute says, and it's now in our ordinance if adopted, you shall submit this annual report documenting 60-40. So that's a shall, right? That's happening regardless if you get points about it or not, or a threshold. But let's align that so whatever our threshold is for the first triggering of a hearing, that hits it. To your point, Councilman Cox, at the beginning, so instead of 3, it would be, again, we might amend that system, but the minimum for a hearing. And then to the point about documented non-food service for bar and grill licenses, let's add that as a violation. And, we know that there's at venues that, the chef leaves and it's a small town. So let's make those 3 points maybe or something. But that's where we then see if is it once? Great. We're not taking any action with once, right? Your chef left. It was a hard week, whatever, right? And after 5 times, so you're not meeting the requirements of your bar and grill. So we can assign that point value such that it gives you quite a bit of time to survive those circumstances in a small town before you hit okay, you're not serving food at all. You're just serving alcohol.
Yeah. Although honestly, given how, what constitutes serving food is a fairly low bar. I mean, it can be microwave burritos. So I would caution against going too low on that because I think there are ways to be able to serve food even with minimal support staff.
Well, I think there's 2 questions that are outstanding there then. On the record keeping failure to maintain adequate gross revenue receipts, Councilman Cox, instead of 3, do you want to see that be, right now, that would be 10 is the minimum threshold for presenting a correction plan?
In the amendments here, we're looking at.
Yeah. Well, right.
Yeah.
So
Just aligning.
setting it to the minimum of,
Yeah.
You want it to be the minimum of the suspension hearing, the first suspension hearing? Yeah, because it's a shall from state statute. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So I just have, for me, a note, since we are going to come to that just have it a minimum for a hearing.
Protecting the rest of the license holders as well as our community, and that they say that they're going to do what they say they're doing.
That's right. So then the second outstanding feature there is failure of bar and grill license holders to provide food service with alcohol sales
And restaurant
and
licenses.
restaurant, thank you. To provide food service with alcohol sales. And not with, because you can buy one or the other, but while
In accordance with state statute.
dispensing alcohol in accordance, yeah. Okay. And then what points do we want to assign to that?
That'd be,
7 each. So each time.
Just for point system reflection, the weight of the point system is really within the number allowed before you reach those thresholds. So for those in the audience, there's a correction plan, violation hearing, et cetera, that's being proposed. And so it's not necessarily weighted that 7's more than 1, if that makes sense, but 7 is, then that allows you for 3, that would get you to the 21 recommendation, which would be a violation hearing essentially. That's the reason those numbers are being thrown around right now.
And just for us all to keep in mind too, that at first reading, we amended this, and I think it's staying is that, again, for survivability, for accepting that we're looking at patterns here, not one-off behaviors, none of these violations accrue right now on the first offense, first conviction, first documentation. That's a grace period for us. So these are second and subsequent.
So how long do these points stay with you?
Well, that's a
another,
debatable point.
Yeah.
Right now, as written, it's 24 months.
Well, it doesn't state that. It just says that they'll be doubled after 24 months. It doesn't say anything about how long that they stay with you.
I guess that's how I read it, is within the 24. I was going to propose that we,
Change
it's cumulative to a year so that it aligns with our renewal processes. So maybe
Okay.
that's an additional sentence then.
Okay.
Under subsection C, demerit thresholds and consequences, cumulative
Yeah.
demerits, 12-month period.
Okay,
Exactly.
yeah, I see that
Yeah.
24-month period there. I was reading somewhere else that, okay.
And then essentially from that 12 months, it starts over.
And we could
Yeah.
say that out loud here. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not explicit, so.
No, I,
I think that's our intent, that
makes sense.
everyone starts with a clean slate with
A
the
new year.
renewal license process.
I like that.
So,
Seems a little more forgiving, and then, but also holding those accountable that are gonna have some more struggles. So that very clearly said, the first offense, and you said it, is a written
Right.
warning.
Yeah.
It's not a point, you don't get points taken away. And then a second subsequent, you would then
Yeah.
receive.
one thing, this is a bit minute here, but on the last one, so failure to pay sales tax within 60, and we clarified in our first meeting to business days. And to me, that's getting quite long when you're taking out the weekend. So I'd like to propose changing that to 45 business days. And even though we've heard from license holder that the liquor division is a little bit slower currently in providing those notifications, they're still doing it within a month of the first notification. So 45 business days would be more towards like a 6-week cumulative period. So that would be something I would suggest there. I'm a little bit tighter on that. But again, to me, that speaks to, from the business owner side, if they're unable to be managing their sales tax, it's indicative of some other issues going on, and I'd rather that were tighter than longer.
And Mayor, I think if I could ask Clerk Fontaine a question on this one too, because this time period triggers after the sales tax hold notice is issued and received, I assume. So what happens prior to that? How much time are we actually looking at cumulative where sales tax is not being paid?
I don't know the answer to that question. I just know we receive a notification from the excise division saying, there's a sales tax hold for this particular business. And I don't know how long that
Before they
occurs
do that.
before,
But-
it's issued.
I assume it's not 5 days.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's some length period of
Yeah.
time here where the business is not paying sales tax as well.
correct. Yeah.
Well, and
I might point out, though, that it is not unusual for us to contact a license holder and they had not heard about it.
So this is one of the things we've learned in our internal process is Rochelle is going to be more diligent. And now that she's aware that she might be the first person and only person that's informed of it, to then automatically contact the license holder. So I'll come back to this point probably a few times tonight. We are finding that what we think the liquor division does and what it actually does are often quite different. Let's leave it at that.
Mayor, my only minor point here is business days debatable? What about like federal holidays, state holidays? Should we actually just go back to like calendar days? Do 45 calendar days or 60 calendar days if you want, because 45 business days, stretched it, but I don't, somebody can debate that. Are we gonna get messy there instead of just saying calendar days?
Yeah, I
We
mean,
can
since our local business might be open on holidays, but the State Department is not, I'd
What's
want to,
business day?
yeah, give time to be able to work with the State Department.
The sales tax hold notice, that's the notice that would then come from,
It usually comes from the state. It's emailed to the clerk and we notify the license holder the same day, or we try to the same day we receive it. If we receive it at 4:59, it might be the next business day. And we ask them to resolve it. When I first became clerk a year or two ago, whenever it was, I was seeing those be resolved and get releases from the state within the same week. Now it's several weeks to a month. I don't know what the lag time is there, but so some time probably would be helpful for license holders because we can't control what the state does.
I feel like this is, it's very important, but it feels quite hard to survive for any kind of outliers, I mean, I collect sales tax and I pay that to the state and, as a business owner, and I have no problem doing that. If I had a catastrophic failure, the building burned down, something significant that was very hard for the business to survive, and I was very close to the collection period of those taxes, you're killing this business without any, this is 25 points. This is an absolute death sentence across the board. And I know that's an outlier that I'm kind of describing, but there is no survival of this as it's written here.
I appreciate you bringing up that point, Councilmember Cassidy, but I'd also remember that kind of catastrophic event is something I would certainly hope if it came to this body or the administrative law judge that can say, this is what happened. A tornado came and ruined my shop or, whatever happened. And I would hope that as a part of that, there's a conversation about that was catastrophic. That's not indicative of how your business has been running. You're thinking about this. You're a responsible business owner. Our recommendation is to not move forward for that.
And I would hope so too. I would assume though that if it went before an examiner, that they would be required to look at the evidence of whether or not you have paid that, and they would perhaps be required to move across to the side of the table those circumstances and say, are you in violation or are you not in violation? And that's all I am allowed to look at. And then they would find that you were in violation. I don't know. I'm making some assumptions here on whether they can take context into consideration or not.
The way it reads now is no. It's a per se violation,
Right.
meaning did you
Right.
pay it or not?
Right.
Doesn't matter if you
Right.
hit on hard times or
Yes.
if you tried. If you didn't pay it, you didn't pay it.
Right. That's my concern, is that this is the death of that business
Yeah.
at 25 points. And we have no wiggle room, perhaps. It's important that we collect and send sales tax away, I understand that. It's just, is it survivable?
Yeah, Mayor, I think I'd entertain adjusting
work.
these points and associated fines correlated to the top of the correction plan threshold, whatever that ends up being. So you're within correction plan, we want to know why. And you've had plenty of time at some point to like figure this out too, by the time this gets triggered. And then if there's something else going on in that business, that would tip you over into other thresholds too, because it could be there's some businesses that are struggling to do these records, pay the taxes, and they're also exhibiting other issues within.
And just to be clear, I was reading the 25 points
Yeah.
associated with the previous distribution of those points, which was 25 plus. So if you
Right.
do change to this recommendation, then perhaps it's not a death sentence, right? But I just want to make that.
Yeah.
And if I may, the statute does say may suspend or revoke, it doesn't say shall. And so the hearing examiner, I guess in theory, could say, you failed to pay it, we'll give you an additional 60 days to take care of it. I mean, there's a number of things they can do because it does say may, it doesn't say shall.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
It just still remains to be an outlier that's the most severe of like some of the very severe violations that we'd have here, right? Like sale to a minor is less so than this failure to pay your sales tax. So
Yeah.
again, using the system of points that are currently in front of us in the ordinance, because we haven't gotten to do we amend it or not yet, I would say let's bring this down to 14. So the top of the correction plan threshold, and then whatever that number actually ends up being here, because we might adjust it. But we're coming in for a correction. We want to know more why, right? They've had plenty of time. We provided notice. You've had 45 to 60 days. I'm not sure we landed there. And now, like, okay, you're still not paying it. Tell us. And then it adds in if there's other things happening at that business that are perhaps other violations. I don't know. I saw a few nods. Is that, sorry, it's your rule, but sorry.
It's okay. This is a group project here. It's like we're in middle school doing a group project together.
So with the,
Yeah.
with the correction plan there, could we also have something in there that, the business owner comes in and says, I've made some dramatic changes here to take care of this, this issue. Would it be unreasonable to say, okay, because you've done that, let's, knock half of those points off or something for instituting that correction plan? Yeah, instead of 25 or instead of 10, 15 points that they submit a plan and they get charged 4 or 5 points. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that idea of a way of showing good faith and acknowledgement of their effort for that. I think it then also adds a layer of complication of, are we going to do that for everything or only for some things? How do we determine if it's a good enough plan? To me, it would be a clean and simple to state, thank you. We don't want to go any further. These points still hold, so please be judicious with the rest of your operations
Yeah.
for it.
Just thought it might give them a break
Yeah.
there somewhere, a
Yeah.
possibility, to make some reprimands there.
Yeah. And it does make me think about things like the sale to a minor, especially with our change of the language of convicted sale to a minor. That's a conviction, or chief, is that the sale to a minor? I mean, one of the ways we note that is when you're doing the tests of their process. And is that the only real way we would actually be able to cite that there was a sale to a minor? We can't go on hearsay. So is that accurate?
No. Compliance checks obviously always, right? The other side of it is, if you're not aware, we receive UDL money, which is a state federal fund enforcing underage drinking laws. Something that I'm moving my staff towards with that money is to do source investigation. When we do deal with MIPs, we do deal with underage drinking parties, to spend some more time doing the source investigation of where they got it from.
Okay.
It's a long road, and I think probably the times that we do get a chance to enforce it from an establishment, it's going to be rare. I mean, there's a whole lot of nobody knows. They got it from somebody, but
Right.
The money's there to pay these guys to spend the time to do the source investigations, and that's the way we're headed forward.
Okay.
Just a quick point here on the sale to a minor. We are changing that language to conviction, correct?
In the purpose language, everything would be
Yeah.
conviction or documented if not.
As conviction. And then again, just another question, because if they're convicted of, the ramifications to that, or the punishment of that is 6 months and or $750 fine.
Mhm.
And then we have another fine here.
Mhm.
That fine goes to the business.
Right, to the licensed owner.
The misdemeanor accrues to the individual who actually committed the violation, that crime. Yeah.
Incentivizing businesses to then train
Train and enforce. Yeah.
and enforce.
When we did the open house in here, there's a discussion about gambling being struck, but it still remains.
Correct.
Can
Mhm.
we,
So there were concerns about it, but if you look at the state statute, I think it's actually incredibly well explained what is and is not permissible. So I don't think, I understand that folks might have concerns about that, but truly, if you take 3 minutes to look at the state statute, that should allay any fears or concerns about being able to distinguish what is allowed and what is not. And all of the things that were brought up are very explicitly stated as fine to do.
for the,
So-
I would agree with you, definitely. I'm just trying to think through the process of, because we're discussing this now, is that there would be an unauthorized illegal gambling activity on the premises being, only employees are participating? Because we talked about earlier that this is for license owners and employees, it's not patrons, right? So we would have to fine them, recognize that it's unauthorized gambling, because this is a conviction. This is a conviction for playing craps, for employees playing craps on the premises after hours. That's where it seems like that's where we're moving to, and that's a conviction for that would then trigger these fines and points, right?
Yeah.
Am I,
Yeah.
am I
Yeah.
wrong somewhere in here?
I want to be,
Um,
yeah, I want to hear what you're thinking there, because I just don't know about this. So
Mhm.
that scenario, is this about revenue? We don't want gambling revenue to the license holders. We do
No,
want to
these-
stop employees
these
playing
were-
craps.
No, these were adjacent.
It's
I
like-
believe that when they were written, there was also prostitution in there, and it was adjacent illegal activities associated with gambling, prostitution, and alcohol. And we originally took, I think, prostitution out of it and right off the bat,
So
if I'm not mistaken.
the nuts and bolts definition of gambling by Wyoming state statute, it becomes illegal gambling when the house is taking a cut, meaning the entity is making money off of that. That's where it falls into what would be perceived as illegal gambling. An off kick of that from my stance at the police department is addiction, goes hand in hand and hand in hand. If you're giving them something else to spend money on, they're going to drink more and
Sure.
spend more money.
It's a house-sponsored activity. It's not an individual activity with employees.
Right. So if you go,
That's where I was from.
as you guys well know, we've took a fair amount of this from multiple other municipalities that are actively using it. One of them being Sheridan. The Rainbow Bar in Sheridan has Texas Hold'em poker every Thursday night. But it's a bunch of people that come together with their own money, sit at the table that they provide, they play amongst themselves, cut the pot however they see fit. The Rainbow Bar takes no profit from it. So that's technically not illegal gambling.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you.
Well, I think that's a great example though, of let's either clean up the language here in the violation or in the definition of gambling, at the beginning of the document, because I think that's well worth making it very clear, given the amount of feedback we've heard too. And my confusion I just said as well, so as indicative. So I think what I'm hearing here is unauthorized revenue gain to the license holder from gambling, unauthorized revenue.
Just as defined, I mean,
Well, and then we need to change the definition
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
code, because I don't
Yeah.
think that's on page, sorry.
It's page 4.
Yeah.
Gambling, entertainment means any activity Oh, sorry. H, gambling is defined as risking any property for gain contingent in whole or in part upon lot, the operation of a gambling device, or the happening or outcome of an event, including a sporting event over which the person taking the risk has no control. And that's state statute for there. So we don't have unauthorized gambling defined in here.
Yeah, which is really the
So-
one we need to define. I don't care what
Yeah.
gambling actually is, since we're not
Yeah.
regulating gambling here.
My only concern, and just to make sure that this doesn't negatively impact like the Elks Club
Yeah, yeah.
or something like that, because I don't know.
The swim team, whatever else is out
No,
there.
Except they don't own a liquor license.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are they-
Hopefully.
They can't go into the bar to do that.
But yes, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
But primarily the Elks, because I do know I just don't know how they operate.
Well, but that was the big topic when we came up, right, in our open houses is the Elks, and they do the pull tabs, and they do a number of fundraising events that they provide their license for. They don't personally take a cut of profit, right? They're using it as a benefit to support the swim team, or one of their members has cancer and they have an auction and and that money goes to that person. It's not revenue for the Elks Club. So that's why I think it's important that whatever that definition is illegal gambling where the house takes a cut.
I think I'd propose on page 4 then, which is our definitions, we add unauthorized gambling. Mayor, can we ask
Yep.
our clerk or our lawyer or our chief of police to then draft that definition?
Yes.
Great.
Adam, can you do it? Can you say that again with a microphone?
I didn't hear what she said.
Can you craft language that defines unauthorized gambling?
I can certainly try.
Your try would be better than ours, so thank you.
Let's see, Mayor, I think if we're still on the violations, sale to intoxicated person, can we go to that one?
Yes.
Great. So this is on my
Yeah.
amendments here to C. So instead of sale to intoxicated person, again, make this very clear, this is a violation that is conviction of over service, which is again in state statute defining over service, I believe.
Yeah, that's great to be more in line with.
Yes, but it's
Yeah.
super muddy, right? There's a title that says it's illegal to sell to a visibly intoxicated person. I probably spent a solid hour yesterday trying to figure out what their punishment would be if that was the case, and I have yet to find it.
Still, that's less than subjective. Again, we heard lots of feedback of like, what's intoxicated, right?
Mhm.
Like, how are you going to find that for a bar owner who's, again, somebody's drinking heavily, but not threatening, not doing anything else, not leaving the premises, they're going to be in violation, like,
Say there's no laws against being drunk.
right. So I think, again, maybe the conviction over service sounds very difficult in Wyoming to get to, but at least here that's what we're actually trying to get after. Again, for the bar owner's concerns, again. You can still sell to somebody who's had 3, but if they're staying put, then not doing any other harm.
Right, and that was brought up by some of our license holders of, hey, we're gonna stop serving you. You're welcome to continue sit here. As long as you're not causing problems.
So is that
Yeah.
we'll make that amendment?
Well, the language is, I'm maybe gonna laugh for just a second, but anybody that's being served more than 2 drinks is intoxicated. So, I mean, at 0.02, every drink that they have, you could argue that you're under the influence, maybe
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
So the definition is too vague, number one. It leaves a little bit too much room for uncertainty.
So Councilwoman Cox, are you comfortable with conviction of over service in replacement then?
No, because I don't know that we have that in place with what that actually is defined in the statute or how to, what that is, if it's a civil.
There's some civil issue with it that's followed up by, I can't remember the name of what it's called now, that releases the liquor license holder of any civil liability as long as the alcohol was served
Mhm.
legally,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I guess in my view and experience, over service becomes an issue when they do go steal a car and drive it and hit something, or they do are extremely intoxicated, fall down in the street or lay down in the street, and we have to deal with. And again, though we fall in this gray area of can you prove that it was one place that served them all of that? I mean, you can't, right? So
Yeah.
that
Yeah, this
that's
is
probably one
tricky.
of the harder uphill climbs, over service,
Yeah.
selling to an intoxicated or whatever that looks like.
I say we just limit it. You can only serve 2 drinks per customer. I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. I mean,
I think we can clearly.
But again, I mean, again, it's been mentioned a lot. It was mentioned tonight. We just had a recent incident where there's a lot of these liquor license holders that are doing it right and doing it by the book, right? And New Year's Eve, we ended up in an all-out physical altercation outside of one of them because the staff that was working did the right thing and called and said, "We're removing somebody. Please help us."
I think we can all can clearly articulate what you were trying to achieve by that line item. I cannot envision how you enforce that
Mhm.
at all, you know? You're trying to keep me from, boosting a car and crashing into somebody's house because I've had too much to drink. I understand that we all would very much agree on that. And we can all envision that when we start to put to words how we're going to some kind of control mechanism, we really rapidly run into, what Melinda just said. If I have 2 drinks, I'm intoxicated. If I have 1 drink, I'm intoxicated, and now they are at risk of losing their license. And if they have 100 people through the door on a Friday evening and they serve 2 drinks to 100 people, they lose their business
Well,
by the letter of if we want.
I'm happy to continue to dig through state statute. I mean, out of all of you up there, Councilwoman Cox is as familiar as I am with how gray it is and how vague it is and how 42 different pages you find something. But I'm happy to look through it. I'm happy to look through the other municipalities that have these kind of restrictions, what their definition is, what it reads like, and reach out to those police agencies and ask them for examples and or data of how much have they used it? How did they use it? What were the circumstances? So we have a better idea, I guess, moving forward would be my perception of probably what the best answer would be.
And I think also if you can't clearly articulate writing it down, something that then can be enforced, then this is not the mechanism through which you enforce that behavior. You enforce that behavior in any other way, community outreach, relationship building, et cetera, because you can't do it here because it can't be enforced,
I think, Mary,
I was going to say, I don't like having things on the books that we struggle to actually enforce or have meaningful consequences to. That's just a basic philosophy for it. And yet I find myself saying there is an aspirational element to this that I am being drawn to for that. And so I need to think more about that. I don't want to have something that is intended to be feel good that we can't actually enforce. But yet I think it's a reasonable goal that, again, we have a lot of responsible liquor license holders who strive to do this. And I think it's a shared goal for that. But I hope also mindful, we all seem to be on board with the idea of having alcohol server training for anyone serving alcohol. And there's a potential that through that training, being ubiquitous, whether it's in-house or provided by Lander PD, that is also a way we can help decrease this issue for it.
If I could give you one more thing, my opinion, whatever it ends up being, is going to apply more to package sales than anywhere else. In the sense of you have somebody that can barely stand up, I mean, some of you were at the community meeting that Rich Adrians was there, my old chief. As soon as we got this passed in Sheridan, within an hour, we had a gentleman come in no shirt on, one sock on, too intoxicated to even get his own credit card, and the clerk came around and paid for him. That's where this right here is important. With the package sales, if somebody's extremely intoxicated and barely walk and they go ahead and serve them the bottle of Fleshman's generally, that's where we come into play of something of enforcement from being the licensing authority that they're over serving, if you will.
I mean, Mayor, I feel strongly about keeping this in. Again, I think we're gonna keep the language here.
We're going to put the chief to work.
Well, if I could say that, like, this is to me like sale to a minor. There's a basic state statute here that says you can't sell to an intoxicated person, to a visibly intoxicated person. That's against state law. And so what we're adding here is the server does that, whatever. We're adding a layer of accountability to a license holder who might be promoting, again, an environment through negligence, through busyness, through whatever, that still happens. What's enforceable here for me on this point is because it's conviction. So maybe it's very, very difficult to prove which entity actually sold that six-pack to the person who already is intoxicated, who then, crashed the car. But where our safeguard is that a judge decided that that evidence was clear, right? If it's conviction, then we're not here weighing the like, gosh, it's really difficult to find out who did it. The judge has decided that that entity did do that. And so I really think that this actually is enforceable because it's by conviction. We're not weighing in a subjective way of, bar on Main Street in Lander, that person looked drunk and you sold to them, we think we're writing it down. And then it's a demerit point. It's not that squishy at all. It's an action against the law in the state of Wyoming happened. Like many of these other violations, we're adding demerits against your license if you're having a series of violations that are against the law in your business. This one's against the law.
Right.
And it's at conviction, which means we know it's enforceable and we're not adjudicating that.
Right. And thank you for bringing that up, because that it is one of the points that some of our license holders had some pushback against, thinking we were instituting this and not understanding this is already part of their responsibility. And again, and part of bringing state statute into this is we realized how much education needed to happen for our current license holders and their current responsibility. So I'm going to say, let's let Chief go to work on this and come up with some other potential language to help better define it. But I think what we're saying, there is a compelling reason to keep it in there, and we'll see if we can find a way to better define it because it is part of existing state statute. Okay. Okay. You've got a couple more here from section 2.
Thanks, Mayor. This next one is around that failure to pay sales tax. And honestly, I think I'd withdraw this one just because of the discussion we've just had around the time and the survivability of this one. I thought about it differently because of our discussion we just had. So I wouldn't make this amendment.
Okay.
Next one would be looking at unauthorized alcohol service. Again, this is, and the language here in the ordinance is much more detailed than what I have on the sheet here. So right now the violation is unauthorized alcohol service, which includes failure to obtain appropriate permits, selling while suspended, selling alcohol not purchased from a wholesaler. That strikes me as fairly severe. And so I wanted to look at increasing these demerits points from 10 and the associated fines as well. Especially if we suspended a license and they're still selling, and we're going to go back to like 10.
Right. Again, goes to you are in direct violation of state statute, so there should be greater teeth.
Yeah. So Mayor, I'd say, again, looking at the current threshold spread, 15. So it kicks into a suspension hearing right away. Again, and this would, like with all of these, be the second, either second of any other violation or second of this. So it's not the first anyway.
Yeah. Makes sense. Any other thoughts from folks?
On the adjustments of the points that we're doing, will it then be readjusted to this?
I think so. That's how I'm
Yep.
thinking of it, is like what's in front of us now
Okay.
before we get to that point.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can maybe do a review at the end if we agree on the threshold changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I think next part is one for me. So this is what we removed in red. And so again, this is something that we found interesting and educational in our conversations with the liquor division. So we removed this in our first reading because we believe this was already covered in state statute. And it turns out that is not entirely correct. So in the liquor division, although it asks if you have had a felony conviction in the 10 years prior to your application for a liquor license, it has absolutely no bearing from the liquor division about whether or not you are eligible for a liquor license. I would say that that is not a desirable thing for us to have. And I would propose that in our permit application process, that someone who has a felony conviction with 10 years is not, for a controlled substance, is not eligible for a liquor license.
Yeah.
So no, this is not written down. This is information learned just yesterday
So if
from,
I can clarify for you guys had voted to strike controlled substance violation in the original reading.
Right.
yep.
Throughout this process and talking with the liquor division, and they do not automatically deny you a liquor license if you were convicted of a felony. That's just something they keep of note. If you were convicted of a felony within the prior 10 years due to alcohol related, that's it. But that's not an automatic denial. They just put that as note. I think the mayor's stance would be if you are convicted of a felony, that you should not be holding a liquor license because that speaks directly to your character.
I certainly don't agree with that.
I mean,
I think that's a big stretch, and the circumstances surrounding each individual, it's too arbitrary. Like, you could have somebody who's in recovery, who had a felony, who long-term recovery, who had a felony substance use, possession or something of that nature, and have more, values and morals than 95% of
I
people.
agree with that.
And
I
doesn't-
agree with you.
Their past conviction does, and they've paid that consequence. And now we're trying to be judge, jury, and God for who gets a liquor license. And the liquor commission doesn't. I think that is a huge stretch. And I don't think it speaks to their character. I think that it speaks to their decision-making capabilities, for sure. But that's a fine line. That's a very fine line of what our authority is.
it's true. It's making a judgment about their character. You're right for it. Yeah.
And listen, I mean, you can argue that as you will, but this striking the controlled substance violation out of this ordinance has nothing to do with a liquor license criminal record. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Talking
so-
about any felony at any time in their past?
For me, it would be more with controlled substances.
I don't,
Yeah.
so I guess I will support Councilwoman Cox in the sense of when you ask any felony anytime, no, I don't agree with that. I don't. And I'll be quite frank with you. One of my very best friends in the entire world is a convicted felon from 20 years ago, right? He's done his time. He's done the things. He's a very productive member of society now, has a family. Do I think there's a time frame that involves alcohol and or drugs? Do I think that's valuable? Probably. But I'm not saying any time in your life. If we're trying to prevent ourselves from taking on something that is going to establish a pattern of behavior, I think that's a valid point that we ask. I'm not saying my personal opinion is just because you've been convicted of a drug and or alcohol crime within the last 10 years to the felony level that you shouldn't. But I think there's some merit to, if you're currently still in that life, that's probably not the person we want to have control of this license. right? So whatever that definition is, I don't know. But I think there's some value to understanding if they're in a position within a very recent amount of time that they've had felony convictions due to drugs and or alcohol. It's probably something you want to know before you carte blanche give them an open check to make money.
I just don't think that's under our scope. I mean, and I'm not protecting a person with substance use disorder, but I think we're making a decision based on arbitrary and anecdotal information and not fact. And when you do that, you create a system that's going to break.
Well, but I think the fact, Councilwoman, would be a conviction.
The
Yeah.
fact is, we don't have right now that I'm aware of a license holder, a liquor license holder who's had a felony conviction, and we're basing that on information from a previous, potentially a previous situation that we don't have factual basis for making those decisions. And it crosses a line. And the state doesn't have the threshold and we're going to implement something. I think we're towing the line of being overreaching.
Can I also provide a little input here? So my question is, if somebody marks that they aren't convicted, even though they are, who's going to verify that information? Because we can't do a background check on them. We can't check with the police to verify whether or not they're a convicted felon or not, unless somebody knows they are. And so enforcement of this could also be difficult in the future. So I get the arguments back and forth on this. In my opinion, looking at it from a practical standpoint, we really don't have a way to verify whether or not they are a convicted felon. Unless,
Yeah.
I mean, they're swearing to it that they aren't, which we've kind of gone over that.
Right. In retroaction, I get that that can be a challenging one. One thing to note, and this is something we've, from the liquor division, is they're very clear of, here's the rule we have, and we're not going to say a darned thing about what you should do with it, how you should do with it, whatever. I mean, whether it's the sales tax holes, whether it's felony conviction, whether it's virtually every question we've asked, and there have been many, many questions over the last many, many weeks about, well, what about this? What does this mean on your end? Not our thing. Like, truly, this is their response of like, hey, up to you, decide how you want to do with it. We're not going to go there. And again, and Senator Case, likewise, in an email to us today, noted we don't want to get into anything that would infringe on local control of that. So there's both guidance and no guidance whatsoever coming from the state level about it. So, which has been frustrating.
I agree with Councilman Cox. I think we're overstepping a little bit. I think this is kind of a situation where this is the whole reason of creating the point system. So whether they have been a previous felon or not is none of our business. If they open a business in this town and they abide by the rules, they aren't committing any problems, they aren't committing any crimes, then why should we have any say so? If they are, then that's what this document is about, right? And the problems that they are causing, if they were to cause problems, is already covered in this document. So, you know, we're overstepping our boundaries by saying, oh, you're a felon, we aren't going to allow you to open a business in this town. That's not, I don't know. I'm friends likewise. I've got a really good friend that's
Sure.
convicted felon, and he's one of the most polite, respectable people I've ever been around. And, for us to sit here and say, oh, you're a convicted felon, you can't do this in our town. That's overstepping our boundaries.
Yeah. So just to be clear, I'm not saying they can't open any business. I'm saying, and I can end up letting this go for that. As was noted in our second meeting, someone who's been a prominent person in our community saying, liquor license is a privilege. It is not a right, and it needs to be treated as such. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But I can let that go in terms of a past one. I do, though, still have issue. There is nothing about, again, anything that changes if there's a current misdemeanor conviction for a controlled substance or a felony conviction, again, from the state division, they're saying is up to you if a current liquor license holder has misdemeanor for controlled substance or felony conviction, totally up to you. What you want to do with that, if that's something that should give pause to whether or not they should then be given the responsibility and privilege of maintaining a liquor license at that point. That's one in current action. For me, I have heartburn about, and I think should be something that we have guidelines and language that should address that behavior.
So we,
So if I can clarify quickly, we ended up down the road of not renewing or not authorizing because that was a question. I just want to clarify that the intent of the controlled substance point would be if they are a current liquor license holder and they are
Yeah.
convicted then of a misdemeanor and or felony. Being a current license holder, is that something you as the council, one, would want to know, two, potentially take action against?
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that
Let's
again.
just say,
Can you
I
say that
can-
again, please?
So my understanding of what this was, so I apologize, we ended up down the road of 10 years, the question, right? I want to clarify that I believe the intent of this controlled substance point being in this ordinance would be you are a current liquor license holder right now actively operating. You were fined and or convicted of a drug charge, whether it be misdemeanor and or felony. Is that something you as the council, one, would want to know, two, potentially do something about?
And Mayor, if I could, if you look at page 11, this is the language we struck on first
Mhm.
reading about these controlled substance violations. And so there's two different sets here. The first paragraph is that licensee, agent or employee, so another layer there, convicted, right? You may recall I was a no vote when we amended this out. I would back this first paragraph. The licensee, perhaps not the employee, who is convicted of illegally distributing or possessing with intent to distribute a controlled substance. Yeah, I think that is something we should weigh into on their license of owning a bar and distributing alcohol. Now, the rest of this,
The third party is
the third
problematic.
party, I'm happy keeping out the employee, great, that's, I'm less attached to that, but I'd back that we don't want to see license holders convicted of misdemeanor possession or intent to distribute drugs while they're owning a bar.
But that
Can I-
says on the premises.
Can I chime in a little
Yeah,
bit
it's
here?
very- it's very detailed.
I think we're getting into a dangerous legal
Yes,
area
thank
with
you.
this. And the reason why is when someone is convicted, they're advised of their rights and an arraignment. And even prior to conviction and what the consequences, what the maximum penalties are. So for example, if you get a DUI, they're going to advise you that you potentially could have your CDL license revoked. This advisal would not be a part of that because it's not part of state statute. So I'm not 100% certain that we can impose this because if they plead guilty, they may be jeopardizing their rights to a license without proper advisals by the district court. And the district court's not going to advise that because it's not part of state statute.
So that's intriguing, Mayor. Could I
Yeah.
ask, we noticed there's other cities
Perfect.
in Wyoming who have this
This
system.
language.
Do they have
Yeah.
controlled substance violations and can we look into that? How they've handled?
Yeah.
I mean, I can. I'm just telling you that they may have put it in there and not cared, is what I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is that it's a dangerous legal ground to be on because you could be violating their due process rights if they go in there and plead guilty, not knowing and not having been advised that their license could be revoked, their liquor license could be revoked based on that.
Does that, what you just described, though, preclude people from passing ordinances and laws in general? I mean, if they don't know, does that preclude us from taking action in general?
No,
So we could take action and then it's their responsibility as a citizen with legal representation in a court setting to understand the totality of the circumstances under which they make a plea. that can't tie our hands from making decisions, right?
I think we're not talking about the same thing, though. What I'm talking about is specifically if you're going to put that, if a person is convicted, then their license could be revoked, but they've never been advised of that. So if they go in and they've never been advised of that and they plead guilty, essentially we could be violating their rights.
And by advising, you mean more than, a liquor license holder,
Signing a document
Yeah,
that
saying
says such. or an
I
ordinance
will
which
be
says
operating
such.
in accordance with Landers Title II, so that,
The advisos come from the district court, not from
Okay.
this. That's what I'm telling you.
right. So
So
that,
if you go into a courtroom, circuit court or district court, and they say, okay, here's your rights, and if you plead guilty to this, you possibly jeopardize a revocation of, and then they list off a number of things. This would not be in there. So what I'm saying is, this is a little bit of a dangerous area.
yeah, and what I'm clarifying, and thank you for clarifying, is this being written in our ordinance would not be considered advisement.
No.
Okay. So I would say this is, yeah, I think this is probably something we're all going to think about, and I would encourage us, let's move on from this, knowing that we will all have continued thoughts coming in the future for it, whether it's a good idea or not. Okay.
And one thing, I mean, you could put it in there that if they were convicted of something along those lines, it could be points, right? I won't use the swear word demerit, but it could be points. But it can't be the sole basis for a revocation or mandatory revocation. Does that make sense?
It does, Attorney Phillips, Mayor, that's what
It
we're saying.
would, so the points would then say, come before the council.
It would give
And
you an opportunity to say they've
Yeah.
received these points, which would then say, okay, they've
And
gotten,
then-
say, 5 points, and they've met the threshold for potential revocation. Then they could come to
And-
the council and say, okay, here's what's going on. You were convicted of this, this, and this. That's a little bit different than saying, if you are convicted of this, you're going straight to liquor
Right.
license jail.
And the
Right.
former
And-
is what is in here, I think. I don't think we're looking at the latter.
That probably wasn't the best way to say liquor license jail, but it could be the standard for revocation of your license. That's just not appropriate under the circumstances so.
Yeah, I mean, I think the system we would have in place is that would then be the threshold for a hearing before this body, or the administrative law judge would making a recommendation or not to proceed to district court.
It would be the basis for points, but not for the revocation itself. The revocation would
Yeah.
come because they've had so
Right.
many points that they've accumulated over time. That's a little bit different than saying, if you're convicted, we're revoking.
Right. Right. We're not saying that. We're saying that person that license holder would be given points that may have these different consequences.
Correct. I
Yeah.
think that would be a cleaner way of doing it, as opposed to having what was in here previously, is having it be part of the point system, so that if they are convicted for whatever. Now, again, how are we going to know if they're convicted? Are they going to come and say, oh man, I got convicted of this,
Right.
slap my wrist and give me my points? I have a hard time believing that. So again, the enforceability of this, I mean, in a perfect world, we would know everything, but we just don't.
Well, it also crosses the line of what is our role versus what isn't. And as you know, it would be easy for the chief to find out if somebody was convicted, very easy. But is that what he's supposed to be giving us information on a business owner that could negatively impact their livelihood? And I think that's a reach. That is a reach of our role as a council member. And listen, we also are acting as though this happens a lot. And that we have some sort of a problem with convicted felons having liquor licenses. Well, it's clear that you don't make decisions without facts to substantiate. This is a huge overreach of our authority. and our power. And are coming up with a really good document, having really good discussion. And if that business owner is using methamphetamine to a degree, I'm just going to use that as an example, that they receive a felony conviction, which, by the way, there's there's also multiple infractions of the law that have to happen before they get to a felony in some aspects, and that we're reaching into their personal lives and saying, what you do in your personal life is now going to affect your business. I think it's an overreach. Now, do I like it? No, I don't want somebody who's using meth running a liquor establishment just like the rest of us. However, that is their personal accountability and responsibility, not mine. Now, if it gets into our community and it's negatively impacting our community, then absolutely we have to step in. But just to say, well, you have a possession of methamphetamine, sorry, you're not going to have a bar anymore. Now, understand that that's dramatic language, but I just think it's a reach, and I don't think I'm not comfortable. When I was elected by my constituents, I never said I would get into their personal business and judge what they were doing. It's not my role. It is absolutely not our role.
A couple of comments. To possess and sell firearms is a restricted activity as well, right? And I see these similarly. I feel that this is if someone was living a lifestyle such that they were participating in these activities and it impacted their business negatively, we would see that in demerits elsewhere. And we are in our verbiage discussing privileged activity and character. I think that's where this is focused on. And if we are discussing individual character and therefore the opportunity to participate in a privileged activity, that's probably open house space where we need to hear from the community on their thoughts on that. It is a restricted activity. It's a privileged activity. It is from the community. If folks say, hey, we are comfortable with this, we are not comfortable with this, hard pass, yes or no, that's something that's probably worth listening to. Probably the last thing that I would add to that is I understand very clearly the reasons why, from a firearms perspective, felons are not allowed to possess firearms. I understand that. I understand why some of these things might be restricted. I understand why there might be a desire for them to be restricted. I have some very strong personal opinions about lifelong scarlet letters. I have some strong personal feelings about that. And I think the demerit system will catch the things that we are looking to catch appropriately and will allow us to sidestep branding somebody always and forever for a youthful error that might have happened 40 years ago,
So I'm letting go of the past. I'm talking about only for current license holders. So if we can focus on that part.
Right. And if you're talking about somebody who's personal, the ability to collect information, enforce this, I just think this is up to the community. I think this is something that should be perhaps discussed in detail, laid before them as this is what our consideration is in its detail. Can we get some feedback on that? Because it's a very touchy subject.
It is, and I realize maybe this is overly pithy, but the phrase going through my head right now is accountability reveals character. And I realize we're getting into dangerous territory and talking about character. So again, this is something I'm going to have to think about because in my own head, I have concerns about how well someone is going to ethically manage a privileged license if they're showing in a very public way, factually based, that they have shown poor judgment in managing a controlled substance.
Very
Yeah.
reasonable, I think, and very clearly articulated concern. Again, I think we should hear from
Yeah.
everyone, you know?
Something tells me we will
Yeah.
from this conversation. So, yeah.
We could get into governing ethics. That might not go very well.
So am I okay that, can we push pause on this one and move on to other things here? Okay. All right. So continuing, Councilman Larson, I want to make sure we haven't skipped over any of your things here for this. Okay. Okay.
Mayor, if I'm tracking,
Yeah.
then I think, I'll go quickly on this one. This is a more of a formatting, but the violations, can we eventually have them in order of severity?
Yeah.
Right. See, it feels a little,
Yeah.
disordered, so. But that's a formatting thing, really. Any dissent
Okay.
there? Then I think the next substantive one I was looking at was, again, we heard so much great feedback about the impacts of a suspension. And in fact, even license holders saying, gosh, 7 days, like that's layoffs, right?
Mhm.
That's really threatens my business. And so I don't know the reasoning behind 7 and 20, so I guess I look forward to hearing that, but I would propose we don't have a 20-day suspension. If 7 days is so deeply impactful the way we heard, then 20 sounds like we're shutting a business down. So it's worse than a revocation hearing, frankly, in that way that it's immediate. So I was going to say, let's delete the 20-day suspension and have 3 levels of thresholds: correction plan, violation hearing with potential 7-day suspension, and then violation hearing with potential recommendation of license revocation. And then to acknowledge that we're reducing one possible step before revocation, we widen the thresholds, we increase the number of demerit points before we reach those steps and how wide they are. So a couple pieces there. In summary, to come back to, I think I propose one, that we just have a 7-day suspension and not have a 20-day suspension option.
Yeah. Yeah. Tough enough. Yeah. And, I think there's 2 really important sides of this coin. And again, at that initial meeting, there was a lot, I'm going to use a fairly laden word here, catastrophizing by some of the license holder. Like, if I have one thing go wrong, I'm out of business. And that's where we're trying to go back to, no, we have a process of warning, review your operational plan, then, and also changing it to conviction, et cetera, for that. So I want to understand from and value license holders talking about the impact of a 7-day, but I also want to reiterate that we are trying really darn hard to make sure we're showing a due diligence of graduated steps before things get to that point. So I'm fine with dropping to 3 levels and changing the associated points with it. And again, I don't want to miss an opportunity to state that we are doing our level best to avoid any business owner getting here. That is our intent of having better server training, an operational plan, LPD providing server training, et cetera, that we have a path instead of going from one strike, you're out kind of thing. So I think there's general agreement for that.
Then the correlation, the next step there is increasing the number of demerits before the first threshold. And I guess I left them still here at 5 and 10 spacing between the thresholds. So starting here then with 15 to 20 points leads to correction plan instead of right now it's 10 to 14. And keep in mind as we do this that we've talked about making this 12-month, earlier in the meeting, 12 months instead of 24. First violation is not counting towards any points. So again, the intent here honestly is to borrow Councilman Cassidy, your excellent point early in this process months ago was, let's make this survivable, right? We're looking at patterns of violations, not mistakes, one-off things that happened, acts of God, right? This is a series of patterned violations where we're taking, again, a good due process, warnings, please correct this, before we get to action. So 15 to 20 for correction plan, 21 to 30, that's where you get a really widespread if we take away that 20-day suspension, so 21 to 30 points for a violation hearing with potential 7-day suspension, and then 31 plus. So that's 6 more than the current version for revocation, recommendation to the district court for considering license revocation.
Yeah.
I hope this makes it feel more survivable for the businesses who are, again, such good faith. They want to,
Yeah.
they want to avoid getting to this point. They're correcting patterns well before their patterns. But we have tools in our toolbox in case we get to a place where we have a business who has repeated violations that are documented, convictable, and then not changing environment, not changing training, not changing way they,
Right.
the way they run their business.
Right. No, I think that's a nice way of stating, we want folks to manage this privilege of having a license responsibly. And if you're struggling to do that, we will work with you to find that middle ground. Yeah. Okay, good.
All right, then Mayor, to keep
Good.
keep going here.
Last part.
Yeah, close to the end of my list, at least I know that's not the end of the list for all of us up here as a body. This is a pretty big one, though. Again, hearing a lot of feedback and input about the concern about city council being the hearing, that we're going to be adjudicating this process. That's my own word, not what we've heard, but we've heard distrust, we've heard worries about past actions, we've heard how subjective would that be for the council to be? And so right now, both the individual violations and I believe, and the hearings for suspension or revocation have an option of being governing body, us, city council, or a hearing examiner. And I'll look to Clerk Fontaine to describe who that person could be in a minute here. But I actually would propose that we, given what we've heard from feedback from so many business owners, let's take us out of that. Let's have a third-party examiner that we hire to adjudicate a process that we've set up. They look at the preponderance of evidence. They have an independent point of view. They look at the system here that we've outlined and they say, yeah, this person, the documentation is correct. The evidence is there. You've hit 24 points. And that person then that recommendation comes out of a third-party examiner to us as a governing body and says, I recommend you proceed to district court. So there's still a vote for us, but we're not adjudicating our own, our own process or our own staff actions.
Yeah. And this is something that when Chief Juan and I went to hear Riverton's council discussion, they were very clear about using this language, which really got us thinking that adds another level of objectivity and good protection and due process for that.
Clerk Fontaine, do you mind telling us a little bit more about who this administrative law judge is? A term we've used, hearing examiner, we've used that term, like.
Hearing examiners are administrative law judges. Hearing examiner is an older term. It's interchangeable. But the term administrative law judge would certainly be appropriate, and you could put that in, substitute it, and say that's how, this process would work. They're typically attorneys. There's a group of them in Cheyenne that you can call. This council could say you're going to call the Cheyenne attorneys, or you could say any attorney could serve that function as long as they're impartial.
And also understand that comes with a cost to the city. City would have to pay for their services.
If I can add something, I think is probably one, this might be the most important thing that you guys talk about tonight. Two, what I'm going to give you is takeaways from my feedback from public meetings and one-on-one meetings I've had with license holders. Whether it's right or wrong, whether it's true or false, whether it's current or from the past, they're very vocal about trust in the council. Some of the fear of this is the trust of some of the council members having ultimate control of what may or may not happen. So I personally believe having this in there removes a lot of that doubt, because it's somebody totally removed, unbiased, that there's no past, present, or current beef, if you will.
And when you reach outside of the community for that individual, they're less likely to be biased or have heard any sort of urban legends or whatever may be going on that may or may not be true.
It comes with a cost, but I believe it's the city of Lander stepping forward, willing to pay to prove that we're completely unbiased and clear in the expectation of the outcome.
It's a good investment due process, I would argue.
Yeah.
Okay. that would be pretty widespread editing then, because that's, that language or governing body is throughout the subsection in a lot of ways. But if that's if we agree on that intent to exempt ourselves from the hearings itself, and I want to reiterate, there's still then a council vote to proceed with, if the recommendation is to proceed to district court, Attorney Phillips, I look at you here, then we still need to vote to take that litigation essentially.
There would need to be an extra step because whatever your administrative law judge recommended, and let's just assume for argument's sake, they recommended taking further steps, you would still have to hire an attorney to do that. So there would be another level of,
Well, what would happen is the administrative judge would would issue an order. That order would come before the governing body, who would have to vote to ratify that order. And then that would trigger a lawsuit to,
Yeah.
or
So-
the proceedings to revoke in district court.
But there's still a role for us, one in which we can be held deeply accountable, right? I mean, you can go through the scenarios in your head right now. We abide by the order, we ratify the order, or we don't. We can be held accountable by various parties, because we'd have a clean record, I think, of what that recommendation, that order was, and then what we ended up doing with it. So we're, again, it's due process.
Can you describe that ratifying vote moment and how that happens? What the options would be?
The options are that you'd get the order from the hearing examiner and you would vote to ratify their findings or not ratify their findings.
And that would be very compartmentalized, and it would not be like relitigated in this space, right? It'd be very clear that that was not our role to do that.
It would be move forward or not. You would still have discussion if you really wanted to. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you guys still have to, you're the governing body, so you're still going to have to vote on it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to envision a circumstance where we go through the process and then it comes back here for that.
And then you have to relitigate it
And then we
again here.
relitigate it here, and then
It
you
very
do
easily could
have-
happen.
And then you do have bias reintroduced, you know.
Dedicated. Done this, but the examiner, his judgment, why would anybody want to be dedicated?
I would agree with you that you would want to take the answer that you've given and ratify that. I just wonder if it would open an opportunity to.
Yeah,
I mean, it's no different than the planning commission when they come in and for zoning ordinance or for zoning changes or things like that. I mean, they come in there and say, here's our recommendations and what we've found, and it's up to you guys. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think it does add more clout coming from an administrative law. And so I think if we, relitigation might not be quite the right word, but yeah, I mean, if we debated as a voting topic and voted to not follow the direction of the administrative law judge, and wanted to pursue it, and that next level has now 2 points, like, so this neutral third party decided this, and the governing body decided this other thing. And so again, there's 2 points of view being presented, as opposed to without having that administrative law judge, it's only us. So I can't see anything but a good thing if it were to move up for that.
If you relitigate it or even argue it or talk about it, you're defeating the entire purpose of why you got somebody else unbiased to look at it.
Right,
Yeah.
we're all on the same page here, for sure. I'm just trying to, I don't know if you can write into an ordinance a thou shalt, you know, during the ratification process, thou shalt follow the findings of,
No.
yeah, right? So it
Yeah.
is.
I mean, you
so-
guys are the governing body.
Yes.
You get to vote on it however you want to.
Yeah.
If you don't agree with what the
findings.
administrative judge's recommendations are, you can vote no. You have the
Yeah.
authority to do that.
Yeah, I could just.
All this is just adding in a level. I mean, right now, the way it is if somebody says, or if you guys want to revoke, we have a public hearing, you guys hear what they have to say, and you vote yes or no, we're going to revoke it. This just gives them an extra
Not that
level.
we revoke it, we recommend a district court.
Yeah,
I got to keep
exactly.
inserting that, because that's a point of contention.
I mean, you would vote to revoke it because then it would trigger
Yeah.
the lawsuit. But what I'm saying with this is just another level of somebody else taking a look at it, making a recommendation similar to the planning commission or board of adjustments who have looked at something, then they make their recommendations. And then you guys, based on what you know, can say, okay, we agree with what they're saying, or we don't agree with what they're saying. And then you have the ultimate vote. But
Right.
you don't want to have that taken from you, even if you, I mean, you
Right.
rely on the hearing examiner or not.
I'm in full support of the third party. I mean, we talked about this and I'm in full support of that. My concern is that our effort in drafting it in this language is to offshore that to a third party to remove subjectivity to the best of our ability and to pay for that, to demonstrate, as you described, for the business owners that we want to have an impartial third party. We do that, we pay for that. We get a return from that third party. And then in here, it is perhaps relitigated is not the right way to say it, but it returns into subjectivity such that there's a battle up here on whether we do or do not. And now we have undermined what we wanted to do in the first place, which was to kick it off to a third party to protect against that subjectivity, right? And if we can't do a thou shalt, which I totally understand, it seems that we've ultimately looped back around to a subjective decision, no matter what we do. And if that's the case, I'm still in support of us using this third party for all the reasons described. But I just think if in the future, it's going to come back around and it's going to turn into, hey, there are these extenuating circumstances that the third party didn't weigh heavily that should be weighed because we've heard from the business owner. It shouldn't go there. I could see that happening because this is severe. This is the loss of a business,
Yeah, I think what we're noting is there's the possibility of that happening versus probability. And again, I would hope, and again, there will always be this element of subjectivity to it, even though we're doing our best to make it objective. If I were then the district court judge, or I would hope that a district court judge would look and say, wow, so this governing body did all these things to have a neutral third party and for the license owner be able to discuss extenuating circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. And then the governing body still decided against it. Mostly just makes us look dumb, frankly. So I can't help but think that would be part of the decision made by the district court, that we made a bad decision in ignoring the advice of the third party. But again, that is my hope in my expectation of how it works, but I can't guarantee that for it. But yeah, and agreed that nonetheless, it's still a better step in maintaining the best due process available for our license holders. Councilmember Stubble.
Thank you. Let's see, I think what's next here, we've batted around, is this enforcement and appeals a new subsection? Perhaps I think I leave that to sort of well, we should debate, I guess, but like, maybe it's just that it's disorganized. And if we add purpose and statement to the beginning, which we've agreed to do, and work on the organization, it might clean that up. But that seemed like a solution when I was getting to the point of like, there's a lot here. We want this to be crystal clear for folks, right? It's deeply detailed. It's fraught with a lot of, risk. This is where we're discussing the steps to the due process to get to a potential license revocation or suspension. So I wanted to be very clear. I want to be very organized. Zero questions, coming from is the goal at the end of this. So if a new subsection helps with that, let's do it. If we can clean it up with it, be an existing subsection here, D, my intent is that it's clear.
Yeah. Along those lines, one of the questions we have is, there's both benefit and challenge to including state statute in our ordinance. I think we've seen it's helpful in informing license holders of some things they are already responsible for. And so from that standpoint, I would argue to continue to include it in here. On the flip side, it does make for a much longer ordinance, obviously, for it. And there's the potential that there are changes in state statute, which does happen from time to time, that we might not catch and reflect in this. So I think a question for you, Adam, would be, is there a way to have in the introduction to this, something that notes that if there are changes in the state statute that are cited here, that the most current version of state statute applies? Is that something that can be
Sure.
reasonably written?
Yeah.
So I think that would be, to me, that would be the happy medium of, I think there's benefit to including state statute, but still putting that caveat in there that things can change and license holders should look at that.
I mean, you could even do something like, instead of, well, I was going to say a statement that would say this is applicable to the most current state statute. And that could be a catch-all instead of saying, here's the statute or the most current one, because that could also get confusing, but we could work on that too.
Yeah, okay, that's your homework. All right.
I propose that Chief Waugh do this.
We don't get to play the not it game here, Adam. You're the attorney, your deal. So, like, yeah. One thing I do notice, and we talked about changing the language in the point system about the over service, but in 221, our standards, so this is page 9, we do have in a definition of obviously intoxicated. And so this is in our current statute already. It's blue text plain, just in a new location. So obviously intoxicated shall mean an individual who is inebriated to the extent that the person appears substantially impaired and the impairment is evident by actions such as slurred speech, uncoordinated physical actions, or physical dysfunction, which would be obvious to a reasonable person. So it makes me wonder about how we want to state that in the point system. If maybe we do want to be using over service to an obviously intoxicated person. So this is 221A standards A again, and page 9 towards the bottom of the page.
Yeah,
To
Mayor-
clarify for you where that definition comes from, it is currently in our city ordinance.
Yep.
And it's under, excuse me, public intoxication. That's how it's defined.
And that tiers in from the state statute that you have to refuse to serve, you can't serve an obviously intoxicated person.
Yeah.
So Mayor, this came up to me in the first public hearing we had here of like, do we keep the intoxication and then point back to that definition? I think as long as we keep conviction of, right, over service, then I think that's the key piece here, that we're not, again, I think we heard a lot of feedback of like, you can't, well, we can't technically waste it, I guess tell you,
Right.
but like, how would we prove that you've served
Yeah.
an intoxicated person?
Yeah.
We have to wait for a conviction.
Okay. Are there other more minor things? I know this was the big part of what we're talking about. And yeah, there are formatting number kinds of things, but really want to make sure we have an opportunity here to discuss more substantive matter, not just formatting types of things.
Mayor, I wasn't clear if early in the session we would be doing the demerits versus points joke throughout. Is that an amendment you want us to talk about, that we take demerits out of this? Just use the
But-
word points, or we just,
That would be my preference
You do
from,
want to,
from
yeah.
hearing from folks that we talk about points, not demerits.
so throughout the ordinance?
Yeah, correct.
I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it too much, but I can be neutral on that point. It's a quantifiable system is what we're after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if the language makes it more palatable, then so be it. So, are there other things that folks want to discuss? Councilmember Larson?
Mayor, the only other thing that I had discussed, and like I say, it's just strictly my thoughts on it, but we had a grace period here for tips training the new employees at 90 days. I think that's forever and a year. You know, I think that's way too long.
Yeah.
But
Especially if Chief has indicated that LPD will do it on demand, one-on-one, whenever you want.
that's right. That's right. And so, that was the other thing, you know, we'd talked about the tips training. Some are not as good as others. Well, we kind of got a standard here with with the LPD doing the training there now, and I've not heard any complaints with the training that has been going on there. So I think that that's kind of a moot point anymore as far as the tips training.
Yeah, I agree with that, and especially to hear some of the license holders talking about their the rate at which some, especially summer staff turn over, that this means they could have multiple summer staff that never received tips training if we didn't require within
Right.
a tighter 30-day
Yeah.
window,
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, 2 weeks is not
Yeah.
unreasonable for me. You know, I've dealt with this in real life, also, not with tips training, but with other safety training that was required, and it's not unreasonable.
So
Just
initially,
food for thought on
Yeah.
that. So you have it. Initially, it's going to be a lot, right? If this is read through, if this is approved, the tips training will be a lot initially. But after everybody's up to snuff and it's moving forward, it's going to become so rare that I don't know that if it's 14 or 30 days, it's going to be that big a deal. But again, that's just my thought.
Yeah.
does alcohol server training have a quote expiration date? Is there
3 years.
3 years? Okay.
My staff that I now have trained, they have to teach their first 2 within 3 months, and then they have to teach so many a year to stay on top of their
Okay.
Keep current.
teacher certification.
So by virtue of that, there will be opportunities to get alcohol server training.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I would look to y'all so we had 30 initially, and then it changed to 90 business days, again, because we changed the language of business days ubiquitous through the ordinance. What would your proposal be?
2
think?
weeks.
Is that? Okay. Is it? Yeah.
It's not.
think so. And you have to remember that they're also being trained. They're being trained for another job as well. So
Sure.
and we've said in our conversation, and this is where the trust comes in, we say one thing and we do another thing, and that is, they said, when they talked to us, that 60 days might not be enough time. And now we're going to reduce it to 2 weeks after hearing from our constituent. This process is really starting to irritate me because we're adding things additional that we said we wouldn't,
Like what?
like this.
No.
We were very clear that we were like, yes, they said 60 days at a minimum. And then we also said that it didn't have to be tips. It was indicated in our meetings that it didn't have to be tips, that it could be their own
Yes.
training.
Correct.
And they go through those trainings. They said that anyway. They said they train their people when they hire them. And so, if you've hired a lot of people as you have, you understand that their onboarding isn't always so linear. And so 2 weeks, and then you could be demerited or point deducted or whatever we're going to call it. Here we are again, like this whole, why do we want to make it less? If they don't do it in 60 days, I think that's fine. Like, then we take away points and we fine them and we do the thing, but 2 weeks is an awful lot. You have small businesses here, you have people that are doing multiple things. Retail is a whole different deal than construction or oil or whatever.
It's a lot more complicated with oil.
Oh, for sure, and more safety. But the reality is that there's also timing is an issue. And we heard from our constituents, they said 60 days might be too short, and then we're going to reduce it to 14. I don't know. I think, again, we could talk about
I
trust.
suggest you can tell me go pound sand. I don't care.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's our process is such that when we have our second reading, we will have amendments made. And so amendments either get seconded and being able to vote on, or it could die after a motion's made. And there may or may not be unanimous votes on it. So I don't think the conversation is going to cease tonight about any of these points here.
Well,
Uh,
then is the 14 days just going to get put in because John says yes, or you say yes? I mean, that's where this meeting is a little bit weird because we have these discussions, we had really good conversation and community input. And then we just say, well, we want 14 days, so we're going to put that in. And then it's up to us to make sure that we say at the next one, or what if I'm sick and I'm not here? You know, then it's like, oh, well, whoops, 14 got slid in there. Sorry, guys. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think though, there has been, as conversations have continued and better understanding has come about, I would also remember at our first meeting, the number of license holders who said, whoa, 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 we shouldn't change a bloody thing. And as continued conversations had happened and better understanding of what our efforts are and our goal for everyone doing their part to manage this tricky substance, a lot of those concerns have dropped away. And we're now having license holders say, oh, yeah, so it could be that in response to what license holders hear tonight, they say, yeah, you're right. I came in hot. And actually, if PD is really going to come and on demand train my staff, yeah, actually, I can make that happen. Or they might say, okay, that's a little too tight. 60 days is too much. Can we come up with a compromise? And so I fully anticipate that conversation part continues because we've seen it in many of the other parts about this. So,
Started at 60 days, we went up to 90 days, it's a fluid operation there. It can,
yep.
like I say,
And-
this is just my personal preference on what I would like to see.
Yeah, and likewise, you could go back to 30 calendar days instead of Monday through Friday business days. There's any number of ways to do it. I think what we're saying, I hope what we're saying, if I'm hearing this right, is we see value in alcohol server training, whether that's done in-house or by land or police
Right.
department. That's one of the many facets in which we can better manage the complications of alcohol. Councilmember Stubble.
Thanks, Mayor. I was going to sort of pull out for a second versus debating the weeks and days here on training. But to your point, Councilwoman Cox, about what's happening right now in this meeting, I think I wanted to clarify at the end as well. So let's say it. It's been my understanding, and we've done this in customarily in other work sessions where we're not voting, but we have head nods of like agreement. And we've had a lot of those tonight. They're being recorded, that we have those aren't amendments we rebring in fresh eyes for another vote. That gets incorporated into a version. It's a new color. So this is going to get very colorful perhaps. And there's at second reading, then it reflects the agreements we've made tonight for us to then vote on those amendments where we don't have consensus. And this might be one of them. There's probably others, things that come up. Then those are amendments proposed in the meeting for vote and debate. And we might be able to come to agreement now on the timeline on that specific point, but I wanted to look more broadly too about, we've gone, through how many, right? 30 plus amendments tonight. We're not bringing each of these as motions to amend at the next meeting. If we found agreement here that this is the direction we want to go into, that's going to get folded into a version that's marked as proposed changes for second reading.
Right.
And we vote on those then, right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
Now, coming back to 2 weeks or 90 days. I mean, the original was 30, I think, and we went up to 90 from 30. I think 30 makes sense to me. 45, I take to heart, Councilwoman Cox, your point that we don't want to appear like we're flip-flopping between meetings, but we are incorporating feedback as well. And I think it's new information now that our LPD is going to be on-demand training and not waiting for, scheduled courses in Riverton to happen, so. Well, I think then the point here is, it sounds like we don't have consensus on what our time frame is here. So perhaps we need to keep mulling on it and bring it as an amendment, but right now it stands at 60. I'm sorry, 90.
90
sorry.
business days.
Yep.
So, yeah. Okay. Are there other elements of this that we want to have discussion about?
Mayor, I have a cleanup one. I know this is minor, but in the first reading, we deleted the definition for dispensing room.
Yeah.
For restaurant, I believe, or bar and grill.
Restaurant.
Thank you, restaurant. Yep, it's in front of me here. But we didn't delete it throughout the ordinance. So we deleted definition, but not references to dispensing room. So on page 15, that shows up under restaurant liquor licenses again. And so we just need to get that aligned. We don't, per our first reading agreement, to delete the dispensing room definition. We're not now regulating a separate dispensing room. So I think we need to return back to that language that we,
Right. So where on 15
Yep.
is,
15, 2.41B. About a third of the way down the page.
so we have.
Oh, you're
different-
gonna print out.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So you want to,
So it's
for
cleanup essentially that we
1B.
decided to take out
Okay,
dispensing room.
yes.
Let's take it out throughout the document then.
yeah.
And then I'd do one last cleanup, I think. You all know me, I say last and then see if we do it. But back to the 2.31D, enforcement and appeals. Again, that section is confusing to me. And I think what it took a while, it's not confusing any longer, but what took a while for me to get through was that we're talking about two different sets of hearings, right? We're offering hearings for individual violations, i.e. you did a thing, we sent you a letter that you did this one thing. The first section of 2.31D is how they can contest that individual violation. And then we get into violation hearings, again, when you hit the thresholds for suspension and revocation. I'm maybe going a little faster for all of you. I think the subheading titles should be very clear. So what's right now, D little a should be individual violation, process, due process, whatever. And then little b begins the hearings for the suspension or revocation. Those subheading titles, I think, could help organize that section better. Again, especially for lay people, right, reading this for the first time, which hearing, like what hearing, what process, some of it's really detailed, some of it's less so. Let's make it crystal clear and very organized in that enforcement and appeals.
Okay.
So subheading titles. Thanks, guys.
Great. Anything else? Councilman Larson still looking.
I'm still trying to find 2.31 on here anywhere.
I'm sorry, I should have done page number,
So if,
sorry. Page 11 if you're on this big, long printout version. Well, it doesn't
Yeah.
start, but the
Yeah.
subheading sections I was talking about are on 11.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you're using,
Yeah.
yeah, the handout that was
Sorry.
at our spot tonight,
Okay, I just don't see.
It's
the-
page 12.
That's,
Evidence.
okay, all right. I just didn't see any 2.31 anywhere, so,
Yeah, it's a couple of pages earlier. It's just
Okay.
really-
all right. Okay.
Okay.
Go
Go-
home.
going once? Going twice? Go home.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
That
everyone.
was a great session.
Yeah.